Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video with myself and Sloth today. Another debate while it's international break, and it's something I mean both of us did not expect to be debating maybe 3-4 months ago. It's David Moyes, and it's whether David Moyes deserves a new contract. I mean, you know, it looked like he was out of a job for so long last season with the Premier League form. Obviously we won the Conference League and it kind of saved him, if we're going to be honest. And we've lost Declan Rice in the summer, and there's been a lot more money to spend. There's been so much drama in the summer around Tim Steiden, around Mark Noble, around David Moyes, around the whole structure of the club. But at the end of the day, the results on the pitch have been, pretty stand out so far this season. So I guess that's, the first thing to say is, are you surprised at our recent form going into, the start of this season, and how David Moyes has not turned it around completely, but he has changed, and, he's started to get results again?
I was kind of thinking about this earlier and just looking at what he's had to work with in the past, because, at West Ham in particular, it's been a series of not mismanagement, but I think square pegs and round holes. And I think there's also been a case of, at the highest level, somebody doesn't want to give control away. And when it comes to key elements like transfers, they also deal with someone they know. So they deal with someone like Salthouse, and we've always had this really sort of hampered approach to transfers. And when you start to look at Moyes' other jobs, and the ones he's kind of failed at, particularly Man United, when you listen to someone like Ralph Ragnick when he was there talking about how poor the setup was for transfers and the approach at the club, I think you kind of have to say that now he's starting to show what he can do with a group of players who are his own. And I'm not saying that he didn't have talent at United, or there hasn't been talent in those squads, because there has. But I think we're seeing him play the football that he wants to play, but with the level of players that he expects, and his own targets, as opposed to Salthouse clients and the kind of gifts that we heard that David Sullivan used to bring into the squad.
Yeah, I guess the sticky one now is that, we knew David Moyes had 1 year left on his contract going into his final year. So he technically is out of contract at the end of the summer. So that's something to consider. And, I know we're only in October, but, given our start to the season, both domestically and in Europe, it's hard to argue against giving him a new contract. But I guess that's what this video is for. So if you're enjoying it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. But yeah, with David Moyes, I mean, like you mentioned, he's brought in a few players that maybe were his picks this summer. And we know last summer, I mean, the players have come out and said it, that they tried to change the brand of football and start to play more possession based, start to control games a little bit more, but it didn't work out. Some of the signings didn't work out for him, likes of Skamaka, and yeah, it just didn't work. But it's been the complete opposite this summer. Pretty much every signing we've made, you could argue, has been a pretty successful one so far. And yeah, it looks like even the likes of, Emerson from last season, who signed Paqueta, they've now integrated into this squad very well. And, they've started the season that way. So he started to get, the likes of Ward-Prowse, the likes of Alvarez. These were his signings. These were people David Moyes picked. Yes, Tim Steiden had an effect with Kudus and Mavropanos and these types of players, but the key players that are performing so far for us this season were actually Moyes' picks. So does he deserve a lot of credit for that, for what he has actually done in this summer?
I think he does, and one of the things as well that we have to talk about is, Kudus was also a player that Moyes was looking at and was rumoured to be a big fan of before this summer. So I don't think it's really a case of people go on about this phase of talent ID, but I think it's more the fact that we've never really had the setup and the infrastructure to get these players, or to really negotiate at the level that someone like Steiten can. And that's not just me blowing smoke. It's a case of, I think we've seen, and the joke of these pictures in the private jet, just how a football club should efficiently operate. And when you have a manager who has targets in mind, as opposed to, say, someone at the moment who I think could potentially add to the team, but it's clearly not one of his favourites in someone like Cornet, then it's a case of they're not going to get a look in.
Yeah.
And I do think I think that he deserves a bit more time with this setup as well. And I mean, personally, if you have a problem with results when you're winning, it's a luxury. It's a luxury to say that, you know, I don't like the style of football. However, we're safe as a club, we're thriving, and we're winning things. It's when things start to go against you and you're at the bottom end of the table, as we have been so many times, and you know we were under Moyes at multiple points, that those things start to get more and more validated, and people start to really get on the back of that. But when you play this sort of possession-based, when you are willing to play this counter-attacking football where you don't have as much as of the ball, I think you have to do it well. And we've seen him really implement that and implement his sort of style of play towards the back end of last season, particularly in Europe, but also this season from the get-go.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think what we're seeing now is, like you mentioned, David Moyes going back to what David Moyes knows, and you know, sticking with what he knows best. And he's brought in players this summer that's helped, you know, emulate what he wants to do. And you know, say what you want. I mean, we've all sat here on babbling before, and you know, we've said it's time for Moyes to go. And at the point, still stand by that. I think that was probably the best decision to make at the time. But you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing. That's what we give our opinions for. And you know, he's turning it around. And this so far, this you know, after this transfer window going into this season, he's been excellent. You know, we've got some really really good results. Our European form continues, and you know, there is really no argument other than the fact that David Moyes is heading towards a new contract, and emphasis on the heading, because it's still only October. That's my concern. You know, there's a lot that can happen in football. We could go on a run of 3 or 4 defeats in a row, drop to mid-table. It's still very early stages. So yes, the start's been very encouraging and very positive, and we started to see a lot more just better all-round football from the performances from the players. And you know, some of the players had to take responsibility as well last season. You know, it wasn't all just on David Moyes. There were a lot of players that didn't perform well enough last season, and they've started to step up. And that's also been a kind of byproduct of the new system. And you know, someone like Souček is a prime example of that. Wasn't performing, has come out and said last season he wasn't motivated. This season he is, because he's playing in the position where he feels he's most comfortable and can impact the game. That's what Moyes has done. That's good man management. That's good tactical tweaking. That's what you want to see in a manager. So yes, he's heading towards that new contract, but not yet. But what's your kind of opinion on the contract situation? If it was handed to him now, would you begrudge him of that, or do you think it's too early?
No, I think he's deserved it overall. I think there's obviously been struggles with target identification over his time, and you know, particularly in terms of players like Scamacca, we knew he was a fan of them, but they weren't his, say, number one targets.
It was Broja, wasn't it, that summer?
Yeah. And look, I mean, as you said, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and you can sit here and say, well, he got injured, but you know, butterfly effect and all that. If he joined us, would he have picked up an injury? All those things. I do think that it's something that I would do is offer him a 2-year contract or 3-year. I would do that now, because at the end of the day, modern football is such that if something bad happens and we go on a terrible run, they'll make a change regardless.
Yeah.
And look, it's not the fans' money at the end of the day, but I think you have to show that you're willing to back him. I also think you have to fend off other sides who may potentially be willing to offer more. I don't think he would go to Saudi Arabia or anywhere like that. I mean, a ginger Scotsman in Saudi in that Saudi heat is probably going to struggle, and I don't think anyone. I don't mean any ill with that. I'd be amazed if anyone disagrees. But I think you tie him down now, and you give him the chance to have this system in place for a season. I think he's earned that. It's multiple.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite. I don't want to act too early because we could reward him with a new contract, say another 2-year deal, and we could start to regress again. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, why did you give him it so early? Look at the impact it's made. I would personally wait for a little bit more, at least till January, to see how things are going, because we don't know what other options are being lined up in the background with Tim Steiden. I mean, there could be, a big change happening behind the scenes where we think, okay, David Moyes has got his last season. Let's see how it pans out. And David Moyes himself might not want to continue. I mean, that's probably highly unlikely given how successful he's been with West Ham and, what he's done over the last few years. But for me, I would be holding off on that contract because, again, we've only played less than 10 games so far this season in the Premier League. Still a long way to go. A lot can change in that time. So for me, he's on the right track, but he isn't quite there yet.
I think when you look at what he's done previously, I mean, particularly in that Lingard season, where we played some great football, and I think we all said we're just a little bit of investment away from a real push. And as I mentioned, we brought in players who we thought could add to that, but I don't think they were players who Moyes would have thought can add to his vision of how he plays. I think part of the reason that we kind of should give him a contract is because I think he's worked with those situations that he perhaps didn't want to, the players he didn't want to bring in, and coming back at certain points when perhaps you could argue he should have stayed on. I think as a goodwill gesture, we should say, look, here's 2 years contract, and this is a big thank you for Prague, but also, the successive seasons of European football. And this is now a point for us to go forward. Who do you want us to sign? If your top target in January is Garassi, we'll get him for you, but you need to then repay the contract, because I think he's the one with the power at the moment. He's got this shortening contract, and as we get further and further into the season, he's going to be able to sit there and go, well, I could go anywhere. It's not a case of he's going to get the most exciting job offers in the world, because let's face it, that's not going to happen. Chelsea aren't going to appoint David Moyes on,
never say
150 grand a week or something like that. Real Madrid aren't going to come in for him. But the fact of the matter is that lots of teams who could be chasing European football might look at him and say, actually, you know what, we might be willing to give him double the money that he's on now and offer him a nice retirement home in the summer or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there is it's tough because there is always the danger we lose him when we're performing well. But for me, I would just wait. I would give it a couple of months. But who knows what's going to happen? We'll see. Bowen recently got a new contract, so I think they're trying to get Paqueta down to a new deal and a couple of others. So Moyes may be in that mix as well, being the manager. So yeah, let us know in the comments what you would do with Moyes. Would you give him a new contract now? Do you think he deserves it, or is it a little bit too early for you? Would you, maybe bide the time a little bit before we pull the trigger on the new contract? But yeah, that's going to be all for today. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here, as it always helps us out massively. And Sloth, until the next one thing left to say.
Come on, you irons.